Hey, and welcome to the Voices of Survivors with Kathryn Moody. I am Kathryn, single mama of two, and I've been kind of through it all with emotional, mental, and sexual abuse, and then just everything that goes with having parents who were unhealed and trying to do the best they could in the situation that they had. So I'm super excited to have this series of lives and interviews to help give other survivors voices and let them shine their light, sharing hope with those who may still be in the thick of it, and really just getting the message out there that you're not alone. There are others who have been through this, who are in this, and there are options and resources and ways to get out and heal from the abuse. So today I am joined with Mandy, and I've been following her for a while now and seeing her amazing journey and transformation. So I'm super excited for her to share a little bit about what she's experienced. So Mandy, if you want to go ahead and go into that with the whole cult thing and getting out and all that.
All right. Well, I was 16 years old when I walked into a building that little did I know was going to change my life for the next 20 years, basically. And I didn't know when I walked in that what I was joining, because again, I was only 16 years old. And I walked into a building, I walked into this place, I walked into a church, and from the outside, it was in a neighborhood. It seemed like your everyday normal, nice little church. My mother was excited that I was going to church. But it wasn't technically a church, and I would be inside of this place for the next almost 20 years of my life after that. And I would see basically abuse of every kind almost. And what this place ended up being was a religious cult. It was an environment that just preyed on vulnerable people, vulnerable teenagers, such as myself. And it wasn't the nice little church that I assumed it was. And being a 16-year-old and being told that I didn't have no direction in my life, I didn't know what I was doing. And so they preyed on the fact that I had come in as a suicidal teenager at the time, having suicidal thoughts, being involved, just typical teenage things, but them taking it to the extreme of your harm. This is sin, basically. It's sin, it's going to send you, to an actual hell. And so that was frightening, it's frightening as a 16-year-old girl to hear these things. And I fell into it, and I ate it all up. And because I honestly believed that I was doing myself a favor. I thought I was, being a good girl. I thought that I was becoming a better person. But eventually it surfaced what the real agenda was in that place. But by the time I figured it out, in a way, I was already stuck in it through marriage. They had encouraged me to get married. So by that time I was already so stuck in it that I basically just went along for the ride. And it wouldn't be until, again, almost 20 years later, when I got out, that I walked away, that I escaped, that I was able to breathe and turn around and look at everything that I had actually been involved in. And that was the first time in my life, the 20 years, almost 20 years, that I was able to actually voice the word cult. I didn't know that I was in a cult. You know, we were brainwashed and believing that it wasn't a cult, it was a church. And we were told repeated, you know, over and over and over, people were saying that we're a cult, but we're not. And so, you know, you'd be like robotic. So I was basically a robot for almost 20 years and having to basically shun everybody out that wasn't a believer. And that included isolating myself from my family, from my parents, basically, my sisters. I didn't have a good relationship, you know, because I had to isolate myself from them because they weren't believers, and anybody outside of that structure was basically going to hell. And I found myself more depressed, you know, that I walked in as going through these episodes as a young girl, and what was supposed to be my medicine and my cure actually abused me more. Like I walked out more depressed, more psychologically and emotionally and verbally abused than I had walked in. And it's like mind blowing to think that the whole time I was in there, it was supposed to be my medicine. That was supposed to be the cure. That was supposed to be what was supposed to make me happy. And here I was sharing it with this, you know, we were brainwashed to try to convert others. We had to tell them the same message. We had to tell them, this is what's going to make you happy. This is the answer to your pain. This is the answer to your, you know, your anything that you're going through. This is your salvation.
Right.
But of course it wasn't, because I walked out traumatized. I walked out just so I was barely standing on my own 2 feet when I walked out of that place. And so to be able to acknowledge and admit to myself, because people can say, how did you not know it was a cult? And how did you stay so long? But when I walked out, I couldn't even say that word. Like we were told like that was basically a curse if you spoke against that system in that environment. So for me to walk out and say that word, it, you know, it was deadly in their eyes. But by that point, I knew something was wrong, and I wanted healing, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, what would you say your final straw that actually got you out was?
There was so many pieces, but I think one of the major blows was when they began to bring it upon my son was becoming a teenager, and in that environment and in that structure, men are very held high. So because I had a son that was turning a teenager, they were very excited to start grooming him to become a man of God, which is another word for a cult leader.
Right.
And so the training that is done, and because I was the wife of a trainee, he was becoming trained to be a cult leader. I seen and I knew what was involved. When I started seeing them starting to groom that upon my young son, it freaked me out. Like it kind of just was like, I can take abuse, I guess, you know. I was already, unfortunately, I had been almost like used to it, but to see it on my son and to see what it was doing to him, I became this mama bear that was like, no way, I cannot sit here and watch that. So that was probably one of the major ones.
Yeah, that was definitely it for me. And finally deciding to divorce my ex was realizing that my kids would never be safe with him. And like, I could take whatever, because I had like no self-esteem or self-worth at that point. But realizing that my kids were going to be in danger no matter like what I did, he wasn't going to change. Like, that was like, I have to get out. I can't let my kids grow up thinking this is normal. Like, so that was definitely huge for me too. What would you say helped you start the healing process from getting out of that?
To get out of the
Like
brainwash.
after you got out of the cult and started realizing that it was a cult, what kind of tools or things did you use to start like healing internally, like the inner work?
The first, I would say the very first one was getting away from all of the voices. Like that was the main thing, was for me personally, moving away. When I moved away, I was able to basically get away from any of the voices that I had been around for almost 20 years. And I was shunned. So that was actually a good thing. It was a blessing in disguise that I was totally shunned by the community. So when I moved away, it wasn't like they were chasing me. But so being away helped me finally have the acknowledgement that, hey, like you can actually think for yourself. So that was number one, because if you don't come into that place where you actually believe that you can think for yourself, you're going to continue to try to find an authority or try to find somebody to kind of give you that, like, even if it's advice and you're looking for that because that's all you know. So it's normal. So when I got away from all of that, now I'm on my own. And now it's like, well, who's going to give it to me? Because in the cult structure, we always had to go to our cult leader for the advice, or the cult leader's wife for wisdom. So we can never be on our own. So first of all, it was basically getting myself away from them, which can be very hard, because when you leave a place like that or any toxic environment, toxic relationship, you already feel alone. So it's really hard to be on your own. But when I found myself with my own, realizing that I could think for myself, that helped me go into that direction of like, now what I can do anything I want. I can bring in healing from outside of that structure, because we weren't even allowed to have any kind of professional help or nothing outside of that environment. So when I moved away, I got involved with it was called Genesis. It was like a woman's, for any kind of emotional, psychological, even physical abuse, whether in any environment. And I was able to contact them, and they were able, I remember having once a session with them, a one-on-one session where she was able to begin the inner work with me. And I had never heard of that. I didn't even know that existed. It was so amazing, because I had only known about like religious techniques, and that was the only way. And so here was this, this therapist or psychologist. She's sitting on the other side of me, and she's allowing me this holistic approach of going inside and being able to find these episodes that had been so traumatizing for me inside of the cult, and being told that you can actually go in there and start healing them. Like, what was done to you was not okay, but you have the power to go inside and start healing those episodes. Like you have that power. It's like, and so she led me through that. And it was one of the darkest episodes that I'd had inside of the cult, actually, that she was able to guide me. And I really believe that exploded a continual healing that has followed me up till today.
Yeah. I'd love to add that organization to our resource list, if you can send me that information.
Oh, definitely.
So I'll add that below. And like from there, what would you say you did to continue healing?
I started just coming into contact and connections with people, whether it was reading things online or meeting people. There was a holistic therapist that helped me through inner child healing. Inner child healing, I gotta tell you, is probably the number one healings that have made me who I am today. If it was not for inner child healing or shadow work, some people call it shadow work.
Right.
If it wasn't for the inner, and she's now one of my really, really, really good friends.
Mhm.
Moving to a place that I didn't know anybody and finding her was meant to be, and she was able to guide me through the beginning of my inner child healing, because I realized, which was hard to realize, that the cult had not been the problem, in like the general problem. It had been even before that. Like
Right.
that was the symptom. You know, not saying it was my fault, because it's nobody's fault, but the
Right.
fact is, it's like pieces that I had absorbed of conditioning before, even in childhood. And so and I didn't even know that. I was just like, damn, you know, the coal is the problem. We got to get rid of this coal. And that's true.
Right.
But being for her to guide me into my childhood and realize, whoa, was mind blowing. And that I've continued inner child healing till today. And that's something that I like to help with others as well. Because I mean, if it wasn't for that work, I would not be sitting right here in front of, like,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah, that's awesome. And definitely that inner child stuff has to be dealt with, because that really is the root of every issue stemming from there. And it's heavy work and it has so many layers, but it's so worth it. So
Yeah.
that's awesome that you're able to continue that and offer that to others as well. So, okay. Thank you so, so much for joining me here. And I am glad that you are on the other side and are helping others as well. Anybody watching this, if you want to reach out to either one of us for help and support, we're open, and you can check the resources link below, as well as the form to fill out if you want to share your voice or if you're needing support in any area. So I will see you all next week, and I look forward to sharing more hope and giving voices to the other survivors. So thank you again, Mandy, for showing up, and I will see you later.
Thank you so much.